Uh, welcome, every, welcome everyone to our March virtual lunch and learn from our work LGBTQ plus Workplace Alliance program, a benefit for our impact partners of the Greater Houston LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce. I am the Director of Corporate Relations for the Chamber. My name is Ryan Wilson. I use he, him pronouns, and we're really excited about today's presentation. We have some exciting panelists who are going to be talking to y'all from their experience and telling their stories. We will have opportunity for folks to ask questions of both our panelists and our nonprofit spotlight speaker. So if you would, throughout the course of the presentation, if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. I want to acknowledge before we get started that we have some Greater Houston Chamber of Commerce staff on the call with us. So I do want to thank our Executive Administrator, Maureen Mowry, for running today's administrative side of today's webinar. I also want to acknowledge that we have our President, Founder, and CEO, Tammy Wallace, on the call, and also our Director of Events, Jack Berger. For those of you that are new to the Greater Houston Chamber of Commerce, I'll explain a little bit more about us in a second. I also want to acknowledge our panelists who are with us today. Daniel Reed, who is the Cloud Developer Advocate and Systems Engineer for HP Inc. Daniel uses he, him pronouns and will be introducing himself in a minute. Also, Vanya Sharipita from Cisco. She's an account manager and customer experience expert, and she uses she, her pronouns. And then today we're also going to be spotlighting one of the Chamber's nonprofit members, the Normal Anomaly Initiative. And with us is Joelle Espute, Program Director, who uses she, her pronouns. And we'll be hearing from Joelle later on in the presentation. So the Greater Houston Chamber of Commerce just celebrated our 8th anniversary. We are the organization in the Houston area that is focused at the intersection of the LGBT community and the business sector. We hope to help small businesses grow their business footprint and economic development. We help support large corporations with LGBT inclusive programming and policies. So no matter what the size of your company, there's a place for you at the Greater Houston Chamber of Commerce. And we invite you to learn more about us after today's presentation if you're not familiar. But today's presentation is particularly a part of our LGBTQ plus Workplace Alliance. And that is a program that we developed a few years ago and have really leaned in heavily this new year in 2024 to help engage those companies that have employee groups or business resource groups, affinity groups, or just are doing basic DEI programming for LGBTQ plus inclusion and our allies. And so that's what the purpose of today's virtual lunch and learn is all about, is having conversations to help impact the conversations that are happening within these companies around Houston and beyond. So let me just set a little bit of a tone for you all about where we are in 2024 in the United States when it comes to transgender inclusion. The Williams Institute estimates there's about 1.3 million adults who identify as transgender and 300,000 youth who identify as transgender living in the US, for a total of about 1.6 million Americans. There's a survey that was recently done by the National Center for Transgender Equality. They haven't released all the data yet, but what we found from the 2022 survey, early insight was there's a variety of levels of support for transgender people from their immediate family. But if you average about adults 18 and over, you see about 67% report either having supportive or very supportive family experiences. Unfortunately, we are also in a moment around the country where waves of anti-LGBTQ legislation have been introduced, with an overwhelming number of those bills targeting transgender people. We are in a moment where HRC, the Human Rights Campaign, has declared a national state of emergency when it comes to these anti-LGBTQ bills, and we can't ignore the fact that many of them are targeting specifically transgender healthcare and access to care. Also, unfortunately, here in Houston, we just this past weekend saw another trans woman of color killed to violence, another life lost in an epidemic of hundreds of lives lost across the last decade or more in the US alone, not even counting globally, the number of transgender people who've been murdered. And so I was just going to ask if we could take a moment of silence here and honor Diamond Brigham, who lost their life to violence this past weekend. Thank you all. So let's talk about what we're here for today's presentation, which is transgender inclusion in the workplace. And there are companies out there that are doing the right things, and that is something that we want to celebrate and acknowledge. We also want to realize that not every transgender person has the ability to work for big companies that have inclusive policies, and that's something that we at the Greater Houston LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce are working to help increase the number of policy or companies that have inclusive policies and are creating more inclusive workspaces. And so we're excited today to have two individuals who work for companies that are inclusive and have have been doing positive work towards inclusion within their company spaces. And we want to highlight their experiences and hear from them on today's conversation. So I want to welcome both Daniel and Vanya to join me. We're going to spotlight them, and I'm going to just ask each of them, instead of me trying to do an introduction to both of you, why don't you all just each take a few minutes, tell us some of your stories, invite us in to learn a little bit more about who you are and what your experiences are, so that we can get to know you better. Daniel, you want to go first?
Sure. Hi, everybody. First, I want to say thank you very much for being here. It is an honor and a privilege to be able to speak with all of you, and it means so much to our community that you're here, willing to listen and learn and to support us. So thank you for taking the time out to do that. I'm Daniel Reed. I am a nerd. I'm a developer advocate and a systems engineer. I work for HP, but a big part of my journey with the workplace and transitioning happened prior to HP because they acquired my company a couple of years ago. So so far it's been wonderful to be part of an organization like HP that really cares about our community and has systems in place to listen to us and make sure that we're represented. I'm from Michigan. I grew up there in farm country, and I now live in South Carolina, which is in and of its own self a bit of an interesting story. So yeah, thank you.
Vanya, you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Certainly. Hello, everybody. I am so very happy to be here, and I'm also very happy that you are all here too, so we can share some stories, share some questions, and learn together. So I was born way back in 1964, and in that delivery room, the doctor said it's a boy, and as is in tradition with our culture, that comes with a lot of specific expectations as far as roles and behavior. And we're talking today about the importance of trans visibility. And in rural suburban Ohio in 1970s, actually pretty much in all of this country in the 1970s, there was not a lot of trans visibility. So I didn't know I was trans. I just thought I was a boy with a problem. Now that I understand things better and after transitioning, when trying to explain to some of my friends and family who didn't understand this sudden change in this person in front of them, I would say just look at any picture of me from when I was a little boy or a young man, or think of any memory you have of being with that person. I can guarantee you that on that day, I spent a lot of energy thinking about gender. So I spent the first 40 years of my life on what I called a gender pendulum. And I simultaneously held two truths throughout all that time. One of those truths was that there will come a day where I will never, ever think again about my desire to be more feminine. And the other truth that I simultaneously held was that there will come a day where I will be able to live as a woman all the time. So, of course, there's a little bit of conflict there. And I dealt with that conflict with prayer, with wishes, dreams, later on with alcohol, mostly dealt with it with a lot of denial. And then in my late 30s, I started to understand things a little better. And I realized that this pendulum, when I would swing to the one side, it was because I was afraid of getting in trouble. I'd swing to the other side, it's because I was being true to myself. So in 2013, I walked into my therapist and said, "Hey, I'm trans." And she said, "Yeah, I could have told you that a long time ago, but I couldn't tell you that a long time ago." So on my 50th birthday, I got off that gender pendulum. I revealed this truth to the world. And I was still, though, afraid of some consequences. But the consequences of living a lie the rest of my life way outweighed those consequences. But a big one was a fear of losing my job. I was working at Cisco at the time. And there at that time, there were no protections. So you could literally be fired for being trans. And actually, that's still the case. There are no national protections. There are no statewide protections in Ohio. It's on a city-to-city basis or based upon the policies of the company. But the policies at the company I worked far exceeded my expectations. I was told immediately, use the bathroom that's assigned, that aligns with your gender identity. They trained everyone in the company. They trained all the managers in my, I took a week off and they trained everyone as to what to expect and how to support me. And the medical coverage was so comprehensive. I was in tears in my cubicle when I found out about all of this. So it's been absolutely wonderful. And I will be celebrating the 10th anniversary of my transition on my 60th birthday next month. And it's just absolutely beautiful.
Congrats. There's so much to celebrate. But, Vanya, you bring up something, and then I want to ask you all a couple questions, but you brought up something that I think is important to flag. Where I'm here in Texas, where Daniel lives in South Carolina, where you live in Ohio, there are no state laws that protect LGBTQ people in the workplace. And many of our cities, including Houston, don't have municipal ordinances that protect us. And unless you consider the Bostock ruling of the Supreme Court, which does extend sex protections to LGBTQ plus people, there's no federal law like the Equality Act that protects us. And I think some folks listening may not realize that unless a company does this policy change for themselves, there's no government often mandating that they protect transgender people in the workplace, which probably leads to some of the statistics I showed earlier of folks not feeling comfortable where they work. So let's talk about what it is, what does it mean for both of you to work in a supportive work environment where you do have some policy protection behind you from the company saying, you are welcome here. And then how does that impact how you show up in your daily work? Do
Yeah.
either of you want to go first?
Yeah, I could speak to that. Well, anytime any facet of anyone's identity is supported in the workplace, it takes a lot of fear off the table. All of us as human beings spend some time masking when we're in another environment. There are parts of us that we hide. I play Fortnite regularly. There are some situations, I'm not going to bring that up in some board meetings because but then the more severe and the more targeted an identity is, the more fear is involved. And as was pointed out by a lot of the legislation and a lot of the hate that is currently happening in our political environment, it can be very scary to be your true self. So by not putting so much energy into fear, into masking, you can actually focus more on your work. Since transitioning and since having the support that I did from my company, my career has skyrocketed. And it's because I put so much energy into trying to cover my tracks and hide my true identity that I couldn't actually focus on the work.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I would say that I can echo those sentiments completely. And like I said before, I started transitioning before HP acquired our company, but for me it was a night and day difference. I had a very supportive manager that I was comfortable talking to. And, you know, at that point in time, I had been working with my accounts, the people that I support, and my colleagues for 4 years. And just the thought alone of trying to picture what my future could look like, having all of those conversations and being in those rooms and having to present in front of people that had known me differently, it was entirely overwhelming. But my manager and senior leadership, they supported me wholeheartedly, and they helped, you know, in a way alleviate some of that fear. They ran interference for me. And I don't even know if to this day they realize to the extent of what they did for me or what they unlocked for me, but it completely changed my life. And you know, I think there's a lot that disinformation out there around kids not knowing who they are. I can't speak for the trans community as a whole, but in my experience, I knew from the time I was 3 or 4, probably around 4. I didn't have a word for it, but I thought I was just like every other boy that I was playing backyard baseball with every day until I was told I wasn't. And then there was a lifetime of stuff, religion and different things that kept me, you know, contained by fear of being different, fear of being outcast, and those things. So having a workplace that you like when the rest of maybe your life is not conducive to you figuring out who you are, there's a lot of other barriers. Having a supportive workplace or people in the workplace that can help you can really make all the difference. And like Vanya, as soon as I took those very difficult, vulnerable steps, it changed the course of my career immensely. I was able, like, I've been happier than ever and had more success work wise than I'd ever had in my years prior to that. And it's because, you know, that part of my mind that was always consumed with worrying about X, Y, or Z, like that space was freed up to really focus on the good and what I wanted to do in my workplace, and just being myself is freedom in and of itself that really
Mm.
allows you to flourish in your work environment and your work relationships. I think there's so much to be said about that.
That's a good point. We make relationships with our colleagues, right? We see them every day. We go to lunch with them or we spend time with them, sometimes even outside of work. So how you are with them is also not always just when you're on campus or, you know, in physical space. And sometimes you're doing things virtually with them, right? So that can change. So tell us, so for those who are on the call who have maybe not heard the term cisgender, that's someone who's not transgender, so someone like me. What are things that we as non-transgender people or cisgender people, what's one thing you wish your colleagues knew about your daily experience, whether it's at the workplace or um, out in the public space when you leave work, that you go through, and that's something that's like um, something that you have to deal with that maybe we wouldn't have to deal with.
I think this is probably very uniquely personal, you know, for a lot of us, but I would say you know, for me, I think you know, probably about a year and a half in passed pretty easily in public, right? So those people that I didn't work with that didn't know my story, they probably are none the wiser, right? But I think there's still that element of you know, wanting to feel like you can be open and honest with people, but also the fear of, you know, safety in general, specifically around using bathrooms, not wanting to be reduced to your genitals, because that seems to literally be the one thing people always come back to. And it's like, yeah, it's crazy, and we are so much more than that. And so there's, at least for me, right, when I travel a lot for work, I do a lot of technical presentations, so I'm in and out of spaces a lot. And um, sometimes worrying about my safety in bathrooms if someone were to find out or I were to be targeted, that is something that's in my mind. And so while overall my life is much better and I'm much more free and clear, it still does take up space, and it's something that you kind of have to think about in today's current environment. Yeah.
Vanya, what about you?
I think one thing I wish some of my cisgender folks, even allies, understood a little better was that I did not transition to be happy. So many times, especially early on when I transitioned, someone would come up to me and it was very well-meaning. And a lot of times intent and impact are not aligned. And someone would say, well, as long as you're happy or whatever makes you happy. And I didn't transition to be happy, I transitioned to be whole. Um, you- if you're saying like, well, whatever makes you happy, a lot of times that has a connotation that's something that I don't approve of or something that's maybe a little quirky. But as long as you're happy doing it, then go ahead and keep on doing it. And I think sometimes about other more socially accepted life transitions, perhaps getting married or finding out that you need you found out you have a necessary medical procedure that you've decided to undertake. So if someone comes to work and says, "Oh, I'm going to get married," well, whatever makes you happy is not an appropriate response there. Or, "Oh, I'm going to have surgery on my knee."
Right.
Well, whatever makes you happy isn't an appropriate response there. So it's a huge event. It's life changing, but it is also something that can happen, be wonderful, and dealt with, and then moved on from.
For all the care that's being banned in various states, we talk about it as medically necessary care. It's not optional, it's not elective. It's for many people medically necessary. So you're right. We wouldn't say that about a knee surgery or knee replacement. Why would we, say that about our trans colleagues? What is one thing that, um, well, actually, let me ask you this question about pronouns. So we're seeing more and more companies talking about implementing pronoun policies, adding them to signatures here on our Zoom, adding them to name tags. Why do you both think that pronoun policies are very important and respecting pronouns is an important piece of what companies can do for inclusion?
Well, I think in general, respecting people is the right thing to do. And it does seem pronouns are a hot topic and oddly hotly debated. Um, for me personally, and let me make this clear that not all trans or non-binary people feel like they need to medically or physically transition. Okay, so I'm prefacing that. For
Mhm.
me, that is exactly what I needed to do to be whole. And I like what you said, not happy, but whole, like really me. Um, so when that first started, right, I was in weekly recurring meetings with people internally and externally in my accounts. And physically, I had not started to change very much. But when people, well meaning or not, would use the wrong name or the wrong pronouns, it feels like, knives going through your body. Because I think, at least for me, when everything aligned and I had this, like, this is who I am, any reference of anything prior was incredibly painful. So the use of pronouns so that well-meaning people who love you, even though they'll slip up and that's okay, so that they have a visual reminder of like, oh, this is who this is. Like maybe that's who I thought I knew, but this is who this person is to me. I think that's incredibly helpful. And for folks that aren't medically transitioning, because I think as a society we have these parameters that we put around what gender is supposed to look like. I think it's even harder for them if their pronouns aren't displayed, because people will make that mistake even more. So I think it's a guide rail in a way, but also it's very helpful for people to have an expectation and a visual reminder of like, this is who this person is. And it's incredibly important because even if you're not trans, letting people know who you are and how to refer to you is an important part of our society. And I think that sets the stage for more inclusion and proper use of pronouns, especially if senior leaders in the company are doing it without even being asked.
Sure.
So,
That's good modeling from above, right?
yep.
And I put them on, and folks may see me present as male and just assume, but I'd rather just always have my pronouns there so that it's not about making assumptions. It's about reading what the pronouns are telling you. That's how to address me, right? Vanya, what about you? Any thoughts?
Yes, well, and exactly, the assumptions are a big part of it. I grew up a lot earlier than some folks in the room here today. I grew up in a very, binary viewpoint. I was a bit resistant to pronouns other than he and she. And understanding now that you can't assume someone's gender basically how they look, and modeling is so important, especially if a cisgender ally is putting their pronouns in, then it opens that door for someone who maybe doesn't align with the expectation. Because as Daniel said, it's such a spectrum, and not everyone who is trans may transition in the same way. And someone may look what is traditionally very masculine, but identify as very feminine, or neither, or somewhere outside of all of it. We just can't assume. So it's up to the folks who might be like, oh, it's so obvious. Well, of course you're a man. Well, yeah, that's the person's going to put in there. So if it's a person who is maybe not, of course, a man, feels comfortable then sharing, okay, these are the pronouns as well. Because misgendering is painful, and it is painful for everyone. It's used as a tool in our culture. And this is going to bring up some misogyny as well. But think of a drill sergeant saying, okay, ladies, to a group of men, or telling someone they throw like a girl. And there's, we could have another whole lunch and learn about all the other reasons that is problematic. But misgendering is uncomfortable. And so, as a trans person, or, I could imagine for someone who's non-binary as well, I sometimes do not share my pronouns because I'm afraid it would out me. If I don't know the room, it's going to out me as something other than that which is accepted. So thank you.
Well, that's actually, you brought up two good things. One, we want to honor non-binary folks who may use several different pronouns, right? And we should be respecting their requests to use a mixture of them, or use they in replace of he or she. But then also forcing anyone to come out or share their pronouns and things, that is also a no no, right? We want to invite people into your stories, not force you to have to share those things. So respecting also when folks aren't comfortable sharing certain parts of their identity. I had more questions for you all. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to throw one more thing in there too that kind of ties into this. And a lot of times people think, or you're just being too sensitive. I'm not going to do that. They just need to come along and do the way we've always done, right? And I have found that being sensitive isn't a bad thing. And if you feel someone's being too sensitive, there's a good chance you don't hold the identity that is being impacted by that action. And so we have to offer a little grace and realize that that's the reason it may seem that they're being too sensitive.
Yeah. Well, I had more questions for y'all, but I see some in the chat. So let me drop one in. What is the most important thing that a company can do for its trans employees? Do y'all have any thoughts?
Ooh, the most important?
Treat them like employees.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I said, it's a really big life-changing event, but it's no bigger than any other life-changing event. And sometimes, we end up putting so much energy. Like, I would love to stop talking about the fact that I'm trans.
Yeah. Yeah.
I respect that, right? We wouldn't even need these presentations if there weren't sometimes challenges out there, right?
I think too that for those who are involved in making any like healthcare policy decisions, making sure that your healthcare, and including mental health care, that you are bartering with the insurance agencies for the best price, or however that works, that you're really looking at their policies for the very broad spectrum of what's covered, to help your employees take whatever medical and mental healthcare steps that they need to be the best, most whole version of themselves.
That's a very good point, because sometimes there are policies that target trans people and specifically restrict care.
Mhm.
But there are other times just by not considering it, through lack of they're unintentionally excluded.
Yeah.
So having a trans individual or a trans, or an LGBT organization review your policies and look for those things that you just wouldn't even think could be possibly necessary.
Yeah, and there's certainly organizations out there like the Human Rights Campaign that have the Corporate Equality Index, which lists some of the best practices of healthcare and policies that if your company doesn't have those, you should be working towards you're replicating them. I also see another question that says, what advice would you give someone who's planning to transition in the workplace? Do y'all have any thoughts?
I could speak from just personal experience, but finding an ally at work was really wonderful for me. I found someone I could confide in, that was, a close friend. Talking to human resources was also very helpful, finding out exactly what that policy is. And when it was 10 years ago when I was transitioning, a lot of those policies weren't there. So the other advice I would give is don't give up, because then I started a conversation, with the corporation as a whole to offer some assistance and advice, from my point of view, like, hey, like the policies, like we were just talking about, I would really benefit from this. And I think others in the company would as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think, the first person that I really talked to about it was my very cisgendered, wonderful manager, and just having someone that I knew that cared about me, maybe didn't like, I think I'm the first trans person that he's ever known, but someone that actually cared about me and that I knew would in certain ways be a shield, because it's very there's so much to actually transitioning in the workplace, and it is not for the faint of heart, but it is so rewarding. So if you can find someone that is a trusted ally, and that's why I'd say to allies, like, you know, that is something that you can do for the transgender community at your workplace, is, use your privilege and your voice, and in certain ways help run interference, and set the precedent that that we are people, and looking out for us is a wonderful thing. So yeah, finding an ally, and yeah, checking with human resources. I those are both things that I did, and my manager definitely, he even helped me start talking to human resources. Like, I didn't even know where to start. So I would say those two things as well. And you're very brave.
So there was one question in here that I want to just go ahead and answer, that asking, if someone says they're a trans male or trans female, another way that can be worded is, a woman of trans experience or a male of trans experience. What the person's trying to tell you there is how they are identifying and showing up is they're a transgender male, they're a transgender female, or they're non-binary, in which case they're not fitting into one of those either or boxes. But you may hear someone say, I'm a woman, first and foremost. I just happen to have transgender experience. Right? And so that's another way that you might hear somebody describe, because they're not trying to separate out that they're a different woman. They just happen to be coming from transgender experience. And then the last question I'll throw to y'all, and then I want to bring Joelle in. We've said we don't want to keep having these conversations. We wish we wouldn't. But how does an ally not offend or ask gently clarifying questions so that they can be a better ally? Do you have any thoughts about what an ally should be doing when they're showing up and asking the questions? The one thing I will say is it's often on us as allies to also do our own research. So I would encourage folks to go out and Google and look up information and watch some webinars like this one, where you can learn some of those things without putting all the pressure on our transgender colleagues. But since you all are trans, I want to give you a chance to answer that question.
I would say doing your own research is first. A lot of times you can find an answer. We all carry more computer power in our pockets than they took to the first moon landing. Now, you can find an answer to pretty much anything on there. Daniel and I volunteered to be here and volunteered to be open books. But just because someone is trans doesn't mean that they are also volunteering to be an open book. So first thing would be to ask, think about, you have any other deeply personal question you were going to ask to someone who wasn't trans. How would you do that tactfully? And it depends on the relationship you have with the person. If you're a very close friend, you could say, hey, is it okay if I ask this question? Please let me know if not.
Yeah,
You know,
make it optional.
yeah.
Hey, I want to make sure I'm using the correct pronouns. Can you tell me which pronouns you prefer? That way I'm asking so I can do best, right? I'm trying to
Yeah.
show. How does that feel when someone asks you that question?
I feel like this is kind of contextual too, right? Because if a person is, if you're really close to a person, or maybe you just know the person in general, and they've done a lot of research, I think the way in which you ask the questions is important. Like, let me give an example. So there's this person I worked with, and we were sitting at a business dinner, so a table of, I don't know, 15 to 20 people, and I knew this person very well, had worked with them for many years. And at the table, they lean over and uh, ask me how I use the bathroom in a men's bathroom, like at the public table, right? And I know this person's intentions weren't to necessarily cause me discomfort, but I think there's doing your own research, time and place, the people that you're with, and how you ask the questions are all very important because I don't, we are on this webinar, but I don't go around every single day like highlighting that I am a man of transgender experience. Like I'm a man, and I'm happy to talk about it and to help people learn, but it's, you know, it can be very exhausting to feel like you're educating people all the time. So doing your research, time and place, and yeah, those I think are the two biggest things. I'm not ever going to be mad if someone's asking me a question, but I will be annoyed if they're asking me a question where they literally could have gone and Googled it and it's very broad and it's, you know, based on what the media says, and you can tell that they're just lazy and not doing their own research. Like that's when I'll get annoyed. I won't get mad, but I'll get annoyed and be like, come on, like do better, you know? Like so
Well, then that's the difference between someone who just says they're supportive and maybe an ally. An ally is putting in some work to help with the person that they're trying to support and assist. In the interest of time, though, I'm going to thank Daniel and Vanya for joining us, and then bring Joelle on so that we can spotlight one of our nonprofit partners. And I also am going to give Joelle a chance to talk a little bit about her perspectives on all this. So let me go back to sharing the screen real quick so that Joelle can introduce yourself. Joelle, welcome. Thank you, Daniel and Vanya, for being a part of our conversation today. Joelle,
Hello.
hello, welcome. It's good to be in space with you, and thank you for being here. Tell us your perspectives on allyship. I've got your slides ready. And then also just tell us a little bit about the Normal Anomaly Project here in Houston.
Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. I'll just start off with a quick introduction of who I am. My name is Joelle S. Feud. I am a program director at the Normal Anomaly Initiative. My pronouns are she, her, hers, or any pronoun. I mean, I am not, I'm not opposed, so I'm just respectful. And I think it's just amazing how we kind of have naturally transitioned this conversation to talk about allyship. So I'm going to kind of do a little bit of a deeper dive into allyship, and then kind of ask us to kind of open our minds and think about what allyship could be. Can we go to the next slide? So I wanted us to kind of ground ourselves with the same kind of universal definition of allyship. So I wanted to define allyship as a person, group, or organization that supports another person or group of a marginalized identity. That support should lead to positive change and upward mobility of that marginalized person or group. Next slide. So why did I add this slide? This is probably not where you all thought I was going to go, but I wanted to also speak to the reality of allyship. And no, and I'm not asking anyone to, help themselves for this burnout, but I wanted to talk about the reality of allyship burnout. I think a lot of us can really kind of sympathize with this feeling of feeling exhausted, feeling burnt out, feeling like, you're almost scared to exercise your allyship because you might make a mistake or you might do something wrong or someone might pull you out or you might get canceled. And so it almost causes you to freeze or not want to do anything or say, you know what, I'm kind of over all this ally. Like, I know I know being is the right thing to do, but who wants to live in a state of fear and of anxiety of constantly almost doing the wrong thing? So I really wanted to just speak to this very real feeling of this kind of burnout and feeling like that shit is exhausting. It doesn't feel good a lot of this. I'm scared that I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm scared that I'm always going to be fighting or doing this. And so I really just wanted to hold space for that feeling because it is a very real feeling. I think it's allyship from this hurrah, hurrah, hurrah. This is a great thing to do. But we also want to talk about the other side, the feelings of anxiety, feelings of, am I a good ally? Am I good enough? What is, it just seems like the line of allyship shifts and changes. So all of those are very real feelings. And Jeff, thank you for sharing that. I definitely wanted to allow space for that. Next slide. So what I also wanted to do is after we, kind of hold space for, those feelings of allyship that may or may not be as great, I wanted us to kind of sit and reimagine what allyship could be and reimagine and think expansively about allyship. Next slide. So I'm going to bring into the space, because I do community work and I do community advocacy. So it could be kind of spacey, but I want you all to just follow the journey with me. So I want to bring into the space two kind of terms or ideas. The first is margin to center framework or margin to center politics. So margin to center politic is a framework that was created or that was really introduced by Bell Hooks as a way to center those at the margins of society. Now, our society currently centers white, cisgender, heterosexual people, specifically white, cisgender, heterosexual men. And what we oftentimes find is because our society centers that group of people, all of the systems of power center them. And so all of the issues that our society and communities care about center them. When we think about gun control, how many times are we going to go back and forth about gun control, but we're not talking about things that impact us, such as housing, such as safety, such as things that really speak to us. And oftentimes those on the outskirts of communities in society, which oftentimes are Black trans women, although it's not limited to them, oftentimes they don't feel the impact of whatever those issues are that the center is concerned. But if we flip it, if we move the margin to the center and not just exclusively, center them, but just center them and center the issues that impact them. If we center Black trans women, for example, and we center the issues that impact them, such as housing, such as employment, such as safety, if we center them and really, really address those systemic issues, what we will see is the solutions to those issues will impact everyone. It will have a ripple effect. Whereas on the left, issues that impact and center white, cis, heterosexual men, as we all have seen, none of us feel the impact of those or the benefit. But if we flip it from a margin to center politics and really center Black trans women or those at the margins, we will see everyone else is impacted and affected by that change. Next slide. And then I also wanted to introduce into the space bi-directional allyship. So usually when we think about allyship, we think of it as one direction. We think of it as, a person of a marginalized identity who needs support, who needs financial support, who just needs any type of support. And the ally is usually the one giving the support. And then it's kind of a one direction. It could be a one-time thing, or it could be a continuous one directional relationship. But I really wanted to think expansively about allyship and really introduce bi-directional allyship. Allyship should benefit everyone. It should benefit all parties involved. And if it's not benefiting everyone, then one, we're not getting the most effective allyship. And two, that is what leads to ally burnout. Because why would I want to consistently be an ally if there's nothing in it for me? And now, not to say that bidirectional allyship is easy, because it's not. And sometimes you really have to work out the win for everyone. And sometimes it's not a win like a win, and sometimes it's a win as a matter of when. But allyship should be able to work for everyone. And I think being intentional about making sure that everyone is able to benefit from allyship will be the only way that we can really see allyship move forward and also expand. And that's not to say that there are transactional forms of allyship, because there absolutely is at sometimes, sometimes it is a one-directional form of allyship. But allyship, for the most part, when we think about it expansively, it should benefit everyone involved. Next slide. And so I'm excited to talk about my organization. When we think about bidirectional allyship, I think the collaboration of the Normal Anomaly Initiative and the Chamber is a great example of bidirectional allyship. So what is the Normal Anomaly Initiative? So the Normal Anomaly Initiative is a Black queer-led nonprofit based in Houston, Texas, that really centers Black LGBT people and those at the margin. And our aim and goal is to eliminate barriers and create new norms for Black queer plus people. Next slide. So why were we created? So originally we started out as a storytelling blog in 2016, really to kind of tell new stories that weren't rooted in trauma and pain for Black LGBT people. But there were also specific reasons as to why the Normal Anomaly was created and why we do the work that we do, such as HIV projections for Black gay men. The projections for Black gay men in HIV rates were that 1 in 2 Black men would contract HIV. And, with no disclaimer, no anything. So when we think about that, when we think about 1 in 2 Black gay men, it's important that not only are we getting that story out, but we're also telling stories about Black gay men not rooted in this kind of doom and gloom projection, but also rooted in joy. When we think about Black trans women, there are a lot of stories about Black trans women being told, and they're centering murder and death and trauma. Black trans women representing over 70% of trans deaths that occur. It's important that we take that story and we really tell different stories for Black trans women, but also understand that that is where work needs to be done. When we think about 40% of homeless youth are LGBT, and when we think about safety as one of the top priorities of our community, it's important that any organization that is working with community really centers these issues. Next slide. And then this is just a little bit about our organization, just from a higher level. Like I said, in 2016, we began as a storytelling blog. In 2018, we became fiscally sponsored by the Montrose Center in Houston. It's kind of our LGBT center, and we received our first grant. In 2019, we began trainings with Emory University, University of Houston, worked with GLAAD and the CDC. And then in 2021, we hired our first full-time staff, which included myself. We received our nonprofit status, and we actually opened our BQ Plus Center, which was Houston's only Black LGBT standalone drop-in space. And still in 2024, it's still Houston's only Black LGBT standalone drop-in space. Next slide. And then these are some of our highlights. We just recently, this past weekend, through a music festival. Our music festival is called Black Queer AF. The AF stands for Advancement Festival, or it could stand for other stuff. You know, I'll leave it up to you all. And Black Queer AF is Texas's first Black queer music festival that centers and uplifts Black queer artists, Black queer persons. We celebrate Black queer joy. We also have an initiative, our program called the Trans Ally Collective, which is a program that uplifts and empowers Black trans women. We recently just completed a cohort where we really developed 10 leaders within our community. So 10 Black trans women went through the program and have been able to, because of the program, been empowered to speak with our police department, been empowered to help develop ally trainings, and then are going to be helping to create curriculum that we hope to be able to become an actual like curriculum-based training for our allies. And then we were Pride Grand Marshal for 2023's Houston Pride. The Norman Valley was honored as an organization as honorary Pride Grand Marshal. Next slide. And then what we did is in 2021, what we saw is because we understand that data is important, we did our own community needs assessment. Oftentimes, data within Black queer communities is little or none. So what we did was we took our own money and we did a community needs assessment in Houston in the Black LGBT community. And these are some of our over 25% of households make less than 35,000. 2/3 make less than 50,000. A fact about Black trans women: the median income for Black trans women is actually 10,000. Employment ranks higher than health when we think about important needs. So economic justice is the top thing our community is looking for. When we think about healthcare, affirming culture is the highest ranked need. And then 25% of persons living with HIV, 25% of the people in the spectrum were living with HIV, but almost half didn't believe in U equals U or undetectable equals untransmittable, which means that if you are a person living with HIV and you are at undetectable status, you cannot transmit it to another person. But half of the people in our community still don't believe it. Next slide. And then this is just our contact information. We, this past weekend on Friday, opened our drop-in center. So starting in April, we'll be having community-based events here. We have programming here. And this just has our information on social media as well as our website and information on how to contact us. Ryan, I think I did your job for you because you were so to talk to me about
It's great. No, I appreciate it. And you know, one of the reasons why we wanted to spotlight the Normal Anomaly Initiative is because if you are an employee resource group here in Houston, there are opportunities to partner with the Normal Anomaly Initiative and work with you all, support your work, donate, volunteer, invite you all in to speak and present like you're doing today. But also, if you're outside of Houston, there are organizations like the Normal Anomaly Initiative elsewhere. There are Black-led, Hispanic-led organizations that are doing important LGBTQ plus work that are centering around their marginalized communities. There are transgender-led organizations out there that need the support and resources that our impact partners and companies like them can provide. And so we wanted to elevate an example of the possibility that's out there, the excellence for visibility's sake, but also inspire some other folks to possibly go out and look for organizations like yours in their local communities if they don't have a footprint here in Houston. So thank you so much, Joelle, for being here with us. I'm just going to give folks in the last few minutes a few more of 8 of the Greater Houston LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce upcoming events. So we will have at least 2 more webinars like this one later in the year for our Lunch and Learn series. The next one will be focused on employee resource group engagement. And then at the later in the year, we're going to be talking about advocacy and the importance that companies can play, and also employees within companies can play, advocating for inclusion. Today's webinar will be on our YouTube. You can go back and look at the last one we had, and we encourage you to join us for upcoming ones. For those of you that are in Houston, please join us for our first annual Day of Service on April 13th. in partnership with the Buffalo Bayou Partnership. We are going to be out there cleaning up the bayou, part of our Houston city that we all love and enjoy, and also showing our LGBT pride as we go out and try to give back to Houston. And that is a really great opportunity for your ERG groups to come out and be a part of our event. Now, this coming Monday, we have the Pride Night at the Rockets, and the Chamber has a ton of events throughout the year. There's something almost every week, if not more than one thing a week. So if you want to visit our website and check out our calendar of events, we have a lot of things coming up. One of the things going on right now is our Show Your Pride campaign, and we're inviting folks to come out. Even this Saturday, we have a photo shoot that's happening. It's in partnership with Sonja Creative, excuse me, and Ike Smart City. Some of these photos will be featured on the digital billboards around our bus stops here in Houston during Pride Month, which will be a really cool way of spreading visibility for LGBTQ plus people. And we want to make sure we get a lot of folks to participate and show their pride. And then for those of you in Houston, also join us June 7th, or if you're not in Houston, come down and visit us for our biggest event of the year, our Pride in Business Celebration and Awards Luncheon. There are still sponsorship opportunities for companies to purchase tables. So if you and your ERG groups want to come out and show your pride, and then also there'll be some awards given out to ERG Group of the Year, Corporate Partner, Impact Partner of the Year, and also some nonprofit partners of the year as well. So, and then as we close, I just want to I'd be remiss without thanking all of our impact partners who make programs like today possible. Your investment in the Chamber is what funds things like this. But if there's anything that you are particularly inspired by from today and you want to have a conversation with me about it, we do have sponsorship opportunities for all of our impact partner events through the Workplace Alliance. And we would love to have more additional support from you all. And then lastly is my contact info. So we are at time for the 1 hour mark. Rushing to get to the 1 hour point, but there's my email address if you have any questions. We at the Chamber want to be a resource for you all year round, so feel free to shoot me an email, follow us on LinkedIn, connect with us on social media, and look for more Chamber events coming up in the year ahead. So thank you again, Daniel, Joelle, and Vanya for being a part of today's conversation. And with that, we'll say goodbye to everyone. Have a great day.